there's a few new faces today, so if you're all okay to just introduce yourselves again. I'm Sarah from Shortlist, so I've organised this, but I am no expert in RPA from a technical point of view. So Andrew has offered to lead into the meeting for me. So Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Andrew Hartley. I'm an independent RPA consultant. I think this is my third meeting we've joined with Sarah. So looking forward to another hot topic of discussion.
Yeah, and Joanne, you're new to us, aren't you?
Yes, so I'm Joanne. I'm an automation developer. I work for Futures Housing Group. So I've watched the couple that you did previously, but yeah, this is my first one.
And you've got Paul with you as well, haven't you?
Yes, that's right. I'm with my colleague Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, good morning. Nice to meet you all. I work alongside Joanne as a RPA developer for Futures Housing Company. And as I say, this is our first meeting with you.
Simon?
Hi, I'm Simon. I'm a private automation consultant also.
Christian?
I am Christian. I've been working initially I started working as a business analyst in automation for a few years. More recently, I've been working in a development role as well. I've worked alongside Simon in Glasgow for the last year or so. Yes, I've been working with RPA, with Automation Anywhere, and I've also worked in developing in VBA quite a lot.
Rachel?
Hi there, I am Rachel. I work for Amy. I'm the RPA lead. I've been with Amy since September, but previously I was with Empower, where I was an RPA developer for 4 years and then an RPA consultant for 2 years. And this is my third meeting that I've been on, and the good news for me is, and the people who've been on the calls before know that I've been just about to put my first process live in Amy, and the good news is it's gone live this week. So I'm very happy about that. Seems to be working.
Oh, well done.
So it's been a long road to get there, but we've finally done it this week. So there'll be celebrations for me at the weekend.
Yeah, that's good news. And you've got Hannah with you as well, haven't you, from Amy?
Yeah, and I've got Hannah with me as well. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I've worked at Amy as an RPA analyst since September time. But before that, I worked at April as a senior automation developer for 3 years.
And Chris? Hi, Chris.
Hi. Yeah, I'm head of IT operations for a company called Veristar. And we're probably just really starting our RPA journey. We've done quite a bit on the AI side, and now we're looking to hook in the processes we can't do automatically, as in we can't do it through an API or whatever, so we're looking to do it through RPA instead.
And Alex, hi.
Hey there, I'm Alex Davis, so I'm the test manager at Chetwood Financial in Wrexham. So we are at the very beginning, so I've been tasked with devising strategy for automation. We're very manual at the moment. So yeah, quite exciting times. We've got a blank canvas, so looking to learn from your guys' experiences.
Adrian, it took me a while to let you in there. Are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I've got technical issues, so I've had to, all my university kit broke yesterday, so I've had to revert to my own kit, and there's all sorts of fun and games going on. So yes, Adrian Britton, University of Manchester. I lead the RPA team, not the technical side, the managerial side. I run the technical team that sits and manages RPA delivery into the university, along with the test function as well.
Well, thanks everyone. Over to you, Andrew.
Cool. So, morning everyone. I've just been jotting down. So it sounds like we've got an audience that's, I've got a lot of people already involved with RPA, and if, a couple that aren't. So, just in terms of the topic of conversation, I might be telling people to suck eggs here if you're already down the track with your RPA program. So apologies for that if I do. But this is just my take on, I guess, how you might derive your benefits from an RPA or automation program. I've done it a number of times in some quite large organisations, so I've got quite a bit of background there. I can't talk for an hour. I said to this Sarah earlier when we spoke. So please jump in with questions, comments, agree, disagree. Try and get this as a conversation rather than my northern monotone voice going on for an hour. So feel free to jump in at any point. So I guess, where do we start when we're talking about benefits of RPA? So usually it's a good place to start is the beginning. So most organizations that I've worked in, you guys are probably the same, you know, before anybody invests in a new technology, whether that be RPA or something else, a new website, a new marketing strategy, people usually want to see what type of return are we going to get on that investment. And RPA and automation is no different. It can be quite costly in terms of licenses, resources to get something up and running, but usually the benefits more than outweigh the costs there. So the first thing that organizations tend to do is look to try and pull together some sort of business case. You know, is RPA going to solve business problems? Is it going to drive value into the business? Now, usually what organizations tend to do is invite somebody in to have a look at that for them. You know, there's large consultancies out there, there's small consultancies out there, but there's experts who can come into an organization and quickly have a look around the estate and say, okay, based on what I've seen, it may take, 3-4 weeks, depending on the size of the organization, but you're looking to see, will RPA play a part, and if so, where? Now, the characteristics of RPA are pretty straightforward. You can look at them on the internet, and they're there for everybody to see. But how you build together a business case can be problematic if you've not necessarily got those skills internally. So bringing someone in from the outside can always help. And what that person or organization is looking to do is just build a picture of the organization. There's quite a bit of data involved, and there's quite a bit of conversations or interviews, as people sometimes call them, and you're just trying to build a picture of how is that business put together from the top down. And you're usually looking at numbers. How many people have you got in a function? What types of functions have you got? What are they doing? How many are they doing? And that is the basis of a business case. Now, there's multiple different departments and functions that have had RPA done to it. So, we know where to start looking. If you've got a high population of people in a back office, that's usually a good place to start. But the essence of a business case is looking at the business and saying, right, okay, you've got X number of people in all these different departments. We know that RPA has done work before. You then start looking at, a little bit more detail and going in and speaking to these departments and seeing what they're doing. And ultimately, you're just trying to get an estimate of, how much RPA might be able to deliver. Now, it is an estimate when you first get on this. It will change as you go along your journey. There's no way you can pull a business case together on day one when you've got the technology in, and then that lands, year 5. It will change as you go on through this journey. That's a key point. It won't be just one business case and that's exactly what you're going to stick to. It will change as you move along. But ultimately, you're trying to find out the value that it will bring in those departments. The costs are pretty easy to find. We can estimate what the cost will be based on the licenses, the resources you need, whether you go for a COE model or you go for a managed service. The costs are very easy to get. What's difficult to get is sometimes the benefits. But people have got the skills and knowledge and experience to be able to see where you may be able to play RPA or other automation techniques to build out that business case. One of the key things when you start looking at this from day one is communication and buy-in. I think we were on the call last week, and I don't know who it was that mentioned it, but the last place you want to be is when you've automated a process, and then the person that you've automated it for says, well, I've not seen the benefit. My people are just doing something else. That's the last place you want to be. So communication is key, and getting it at the beginning is key. So whether you've got a CFO or a head of finance, a CTO, COO, whoever that may be, you need to start getting their buy-in from day one, because it will make your journey a hell of a lot easier than it will without those people. And when you stress to the guys that this is an initial business case, as I said, it will change as you go along that journey. But you need to get their buy-in very early, because you will be, going to finance for help to track the benefits. You'll be using operations team if you're in there. You'll be using their resources to build the automations potentially. So trying to get their buy-in is key. right at the beginning and the outset. So once you've got, a framework of a business case, there's different benefits that you can get driven. I tend to say that, the easiest one to drive is resources. RPA will save resources. If you've got 100 people in a back office site, you're going to save people in that site. So it is a numbers game in terms of, you may not need 100 people. You may only need 50 at the end of the automation program. And that's basically what I've built most of my business cases on, is the resources that you free up when you do an automation program. And again, it's back to communication in terms of some of those numbers can look quite scary. So as I say, if you've got a team of 100 people and someone comes in and says, well, potentially we can get rid of, we could remove 30% of that resource, people will stand back and go, well, okay, people will be nervous. You've got to have a plan of what you're going to do with that resource, because once you've automated a process or processes, if you don't release the resource that you've automated, you won't get the benefits from it. So yeah, so communication king, especially on business case and benefits value. There's different ways and means of getting buy-in from people in terms of when you do start automating processes. The best way is to get the buy-in up front. So if you found a process in an operations team or a finance team and you're thinking of automating that process, what you need to get is buy-in from the person that owns that process to say, once we automate that process, we will deliver X benefit. Now, most organizations have budgets for each functions, and most of them have budget lines. When you're automating a process, you need to get agreement from that process owner that that budget line will change once you've automated that process. So let's say you've got a team of 10 and you're going to automate something that releases 5. You need to make sure and agree before you've automated it that 5 can come out of that budget somewhere. And if that 5 people are going to move somewhere else, then that budget needs to be picked up elsewhere. Because you'll get into the position where you automate it and they'll just stay around and they'll find them something else to do. And then you won't see the business, the realization of the resource that you've released. This is why having someone from finance very early on is always good, because ultimately they track the numbers. So having someone aligned to the program from a finance department is always a good idea. But absolutely getting the buy-in from someone before you've automated a process to start seeing the benefit is key. Now, again, in different organizations, I've always worked for businesses that have budget challenges. So I've worked in operations most of my career, and every year we get a budget challenge set. What you want to try and do is, if that's how your business is made up, is make sure that your RPA team is an enabler of people's challenges. Because again, then you start to get the buy-in from them. So if they've got to reduce, their budget by 20%, you've got a tool that will help them reduce it by that 20%. So again, it's back to the communication, making sure that people are coming to you with, opportunities to automate processes. There's other different types of benefits that you can derive out of this. I've got examples that I can go through that, there's FTE resource that you can reduce, but there's other things that crop up in terms of, other costs in the business. I've worked on processes where when we've done an in-depth review of a process to see whether RPA can play a part, yes, you might find it can, but what you'll also find is things that the business don't know. So, you start doing detailed reviews of your organization, you start finding things that, certain people don't know that's happening because they've not invested the time or energy in there. An example I've got there is we were working with 2 suppliers for a process with the credit card business. And we had 2 suppliers working what was called a trace process. And that was where you send out a piece of mail and it comes back and they're saying the customer doesn't live there. Now, when we did an in-depth review, we saw that there was 2 suppliers in there and they were basically doing the same job. And no one knew this because no one had invested the time to have a look at it. So what we did there, we did automate a small part of the process using RPA. But what we also did, we took it back to the business and said, look, using data, you've got 2 suppliers here that you're paying X amount for. You don't need 2. You only need 1 because they're doing the same job. And then again, it's, well, how much did that save? Well, we saved a supplier cost here of X. Right, well, okay, do you agree that following the detailed review from the automation team, that saving there is attributed to the automation team? The saving in terms of the bots was only small, but the saving in terms of reducing 2 suppliers to 1 was quite significant. So again, it's, you know, other types of benefits you can get from an RPA program, not just, you know, resources. You find things out that you didn't know was going on in your business. Other things I've done in the past, in terms of not just resource benefits, in terms of new business. So we looked at a new business process. This was for credit cards again, and they were running a process once a month on the back of someone's desk to try and generate new business. We went in there, had a look at it. We saw that if we increased the frequency of that process from once a month to twice a week, we actually started generating more new business. And again, what we did there, each account that we generated was worth X to the business. We agreed with the business owner that as a result of the automation, we'd increase new business by X, and we got the number and made sure that was attributed again to the automation team. So that was another financial benefit, but not necessarily just resource. So again, when you start inviting people in or having a look yourself, you'll be surprised what you see in your business. There's little nuggets in there that you don't know that's happening. And when you invest a little bit of time from automation, you tend to find some of these nuggets. Other things you'll be aware of probably from the news in terms of soft benefits. So, you know, we've all gone through the pandemic, and it's been a challenge for most organizations in terms of, you know, moving resources at home. Well, if you've got bots in there, you know, those that had bots prior to the pandemic have probably got through this slightly better than those that didn't. The bots, you know, don't get sick, and they do run 24/7 with very little resources required to run them. Other small things that you may find in there. So I've come from financial services, so we're, you know, very much in line with what the FCA tell us to do. So when we talk about treating customers fairly, again, when you've got humans in the loop, we found a process whereby we were removing fees for customers. But when you had humans removing the fees, humans make different judgments. So in one case, one customer may get the fee removed. Another employee may look at that and they don't get the fee removed. When you start sticking automation in, it's usually one rule. So you get a little bit of consistency there so that everyone's following the same path, and ultimately the outcome is the same for the customer all along the way through it. What else have I got written down? MI, detailed MI, the byproduct of an automation program, especially RPA. You'd be surprised the amount of organizations that are still filling out spreadsheets with volumes of work and times that people are taking to do them. This is all built into all the RPA products. You know exactly how many widgets you've got. You know exactly how long it's taking to do it. So SLA tracking is a hell of a lot easier. In terms of how the process has worked, you've got detailed logs in there. So when you talk about audits from an RPA function tend to be quite easy because you've got all the logs there and available. So again, that's another byproduct of an RPA program. Not a massive benefit depending on which area you're working, but if you work in the audit team, they love technology and they love RPA because it's a hell of a lot easier to audit an RPA function because everything is there to, you know, freely to see. And I think that's my list of potential benefits. I tried to hurry through that. I have got pages of notes that I was going to go through, but I wanted to try and have this as a conversation. And bearing in mind, we've got quite a few people on here that are already in and around RPA. It's probably good to get other people's views on, you know, benefits and tracking. So I guess I'll open it up to any initial questions if anyone's got any or observations.
Yeah, Simon, have you got anything to add to that? You've worked on some pretty large projects, haven't you? I think, did you say about 500 robots in your current client?
No, there's 150 in the current project. I have some things to add on the benefits. Some of the things that I've seen, there's maybe a bit of overlap, but maybe just the wording and how we would phrase it in our business. So I think quality is a massive benefit of RPA. You know, you have robots, if you program them correctly, do not make any mistakes. So you can reach 100% quality. especially for data input tasks. The other thing I would say is we use this word avoidance as well. If you're already if you already have an RPA program, then you can identify processes that you can automate before you even hire the people to do the job. So in that instance, you'll be avoiding FTE instead of reducing it. You've got quality, avoidance, capacity as well. So you may have a team that can output 50 units. You put in the RPA and you still keep the 50 people, but now you can process 500 units. So it's not always about reducing the headcount. In my experience, there's a few other benefits to RPA. And then if you add in, headcount reduction, it's a very, very multi-pronged approach to increasing the efficiency of your business.
One thing I forgot to mention, which is probably a key one actually, is, and this is one of the sales pitches that they give you, but it is true. I have seen this is staff morale. So if you've got people sat doing the same mundane thing over and over again, it can be mundane for them. And we worked in a fraud function previously, and they were skilled fraud investigators. And what they were spending most of their time was doing data entry and not being able to investigate fraud. So the morale wasn't the best. And what we did is we went in there and we automated a hell of a lot in that function, and it freed the guys up to concentrate on what they were trained to do, which is investigate fraud and not moving, widgets from one spreadsheet into a mainframe or types of work like that. So staff morale is quite good. There is a bit of a curve that I've seen when you start going into functions. When you automate a process, what tends to happen is, because people aren't familiar with it, there does seem to be some sort of blame culture that can arise, whereby the bots will do something and the team will go, well, the bot shouldn't have done that. And then you look back and it says, well, that's because you told the bot to do that. And it's usually because of their lack of understanding of how a bot works, in terms of, it's very black and white what they do. And if they're told to do something, they will do it. And what I saw was that initially when you put some things in, the robots didn't necessarily have the greatest, the opinion of them wasn't the greatest initially, because what they saw was lots of issues that were coming out on the back of a robot run. But it wasn't anything to do with the robots, it's how the robots were taught to do something. And then it was a bit like a hockey stick in terms of the curve. And then eventually, when you sat with the guys and you ironed out the issues that you've seen, it ended up the guys, they love the bots, and they were actually coming on to our department and going, knocking on the door saying, can you do this for us? Can you do that for us with bots? And that's where you want to be. If you can get to the position where you've got people knocking on your door saying, what about this? What about that? I won't say you've won, but you've gone a long way in making that a real success. So yeah, staff morale is one that I did miss, but it does come and it does help with engagement in terms of your employees, because like I say, you're taking away some of the stuff that they really don't want to do and just leaving them to do the value add.
In terms of return on that, then how you kind of justify that afterwards? Have you delivered? How do you then go and justify your return on investment? Or Chris, I know you've got some views on ROI as opposed to ROV.
Yeah, we tend to. So we have the same issue, and it probably derives a little bit from the FTE issue. So we're probably more like Simon. We don't really like to look towards FTE. We find it just causes a lot of arguments and people fighting over budget and various other bits and pieces. So what we tend to do is make it a growth thing. We're quite lucky in the fact that the company's consistently growing, so they can kind of use the FTE thing about, well, it's not a reduction in budget as such, it's going to be an actual saving over the next 3 years, because we're not going to have to bring in a number of people if we automate that process. So that's kind of the way we would look at it first and foremost, and then the other stuff about that Simon was saying, we take that on board. But we tend to look at return on value. So I'll give you a bit of an example at the moment, they're doing a mailroom automation project, which is in its infancy, and they're just literally scoping it out at the moment. And obviously part of that is a little bit of RPA, and that'll probably be the first official RPA project that Veristar do. And on talking to them, what they always forget to do is look where else that little bit of automation can help with a small tweak. And there's actually massive value in other departments that they can get from that same function. So there's, I've now got a meeting next week where we're going to run through the spec on that to try and like drag in other departments from the start so that they can start to see the benefits of RPA. And then what we're going to do off the back of that is make RPA an official, proper process. Well, it's going to be a process improvement project, and we're going to make RPA the centre of that. That's what we're hoping to do. But most of our, where we've been able to prove something, we've proved the value of it. So we'll look at a process and we'll say, right, we think that's going to save us like 120 minutes in time, let's say. And we'll stick at that. We don't go any further than that. We don't say that's going to save us £1 million or 2 million quid or whatever, because you can pretty much work it out off the percentage of the value that's going to save you. There's no point in delving down deep and dark into it. The only point where we do give an ROI figure would be on the projects that are massive in cost. So if it's over £500,000 that we're spending, then we go delve into all of that. I try and stay away from it if I can. I just don't believe in it. Pretty much don't believe in it. I think I've never really seen somebody give me an accurate ROI figure. It tends to swivel and change and thing as the project goes on, and then it's completely different to what it was at the start, at the end. And then really you're proving the figure that it was at the end, so you might as well not have bothered. And I know from a sales pitch and sales tactic and things like that from people who are going into businesses and trying to pitch them something, it's kind of the de facto thing that they do. I'll go back to something I said last week about Citrix when they approached us and started touting they could save us £3 million in ROI straight away off all of our processes without even meeting us, without even coming in and seeing us and all that sort of stuff. And I just find it all a bit, it's a bit finger in the air to me. I may be wrong, but that's just my opinion.
That's, I think, one of the issues we're finding with just looking at ROI at the moment. One of the processes that we've done, it obviously doesn't have much ROI, but there's so many other benefits there. Like, for instance, this process I was doing was unfortunately only done by one person in the company, which is obviously a single point of failure in itself. And by automating it, obviously it's sort of meant that it's not just this one person looking at it.
Oh,
she paused there.
just frozen. Rachel, have you got anything to add, or wait for Joanne to come back?
Yeah. So obviously this is it is a big thing, and it's something I'm really conscious of in this role that I'm in now, because when I was in Empower, it was initially we were just kind of set up as a little team of 4 of us sitting in a dark corner, just working away on processes, and then we started to grow, and the financial benefits of it weren't something we were really, we weren't on top of that all the time, and then suddenly we got asked, because of the licensing costs and stuff, we got asked what, to show the benefits, and it was really hard to show, because like Simon and Chris both mentioned, and Andrew as well, we didn't get rid of any staff, we didn't pay anybody off so when we automated their role, but there was the benefit there of doing it. And it was called out quite a few times, and it was, the question was asked quite a few times, and it is something that's hard to pinpoint. So in this role, I've already tried to kind of call it out, that it's not something that's easy to define, and you need to kind of be looking beyond just the FTE savings and the financial savings to the kind of things that everybody's mentioned already. So you know, the quality of the work, the fact that it's production's increased, you can get through a lot of work a lot quicker, and all those kind of benefits that go with it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We find that again, service delivery, when we were trying to justify putting a service delivery team in, there's no real added value to the bottom line. We're not going to make a profit off that team, but what it does do is shores us up internally. Our internal processes are better. We make sure that the services are delivered the way they were supposed to be delivered, etc., etc. So, you know, the return on value on that was massive, especially within IT. It was huge for us, and it ended up not becoming a finance conversation. It was more of a conversation internally on how the service could benefit across everybody, and that includes like the dev teams, service delivery, the IT ops teams, service desk, various of the teams that we've got, and including some of the operations teams as well. We've got, because we would deal with broadband and things like that, they've got a lot of services as well that sit kind of more on a tech side, so we could help them as well, in terms of getting them streamlined and making sure they were doing what they said they were doing, making sure they were adhering to regulation and things like that, all of which was never done before. But if we'd gone in on a purely ROI perspective, because obviously you need about 10, 15 people for that, I don't think we'd have got anywhere. I'd have been going around in circles for a while with it, because they'd have been, not sure. So we did it on ROV instead, and we did put an ROI figure in there, but it wasn't really looked at. It was the ROV that was looked at.
Yeah, I think the stress in Empower, the stress, because they give us a target that we had to save, and it had to be direct cost savings. So basically we had to let staff go, and that wasn't always going to happen. And the amount of processes that we had to overlook that it would have been really good for automation and would have really benefited in other ways, we couldn't do because there was no cost there. There was no actual cost saving there. And I think Andrew hit the nail on the head at the start of his discussion when he said it's about comms, it's about discussing that and setting people's expectations up front, that you might not actually see any financial savings, but you're going to see benefits as well within the company anyway.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it, and especially with something like this. I mean, I know, so we would not necessarily, and go back to Andrew's point about dragging somebody from financing from the start, just the way we're set up, it would be more, we drag somebody more from projects in who would have a contact in finance, and they would just ring finance and say, right, we think it's going to be this much on this project, what do you think? And then they would bring back that. So they wouldn't ever, the finance people are never involved on any of the projects. They just sign off the cost as to whether or not the company's got enough money in the pot to spend the cash. We do have budgets, but they're not fixed. So they're based on a basic thing of how many licenses do you need this year? How much hardware do you need this year? Right, that's your budget. Anything outside of that, like this, that benefits the company is done completely separately, and a bit might come out of our budget, and a bit might come out of our ops budget, and a bit might come out of someone else's budget, or it'll just be we go to the venture capitalists and get the cash from them. So there's various different channels as to where that funding will come from. So it's very difficult in terms of when we start putting figures on it, to get a detailed ROI for pretty much anything that we do. There's a few things where it's dead easy, and you can demonstrate that if you're just purchasing a piece of software off the shelf. Generally, I can get you an ROI figure for that pretty quickly, because we know what the benefits are, we know what we're going to do with it, we know what we're going to stick it in with. I think RPA is like almost a never-ending journey, if you like. You can do so much with it. So you'd start and you do one process, then you do another, then you do another, then you do another, then you do more complex ones, then you keep going, then you go into other departments and keep going, and it's this massive thing. So how you could determine what your ROI would be over the whole project straight away would be impossible. So you just have to do it by process. and I'm not sure really what the benefit of that, especially from my side, would be. I know a finance person would love it, but just from my perspective, I don't think it works.
So I think it probably then depends on the organisation. So I've done this a number of times, and those organisations have always want to look at the return on the investment. And I mentioned the other benefits that derive from it as well, but we've always built business cases based on freeing up resource. I've not yet worked on a process that we've automated that's resulted in someone leaving the business. But what we've done is we've freed up the resources by using RPA, and that resources have been moved elsewhere, and that's been tracked elsewhere with finance. So people, I think it must depend on the organisation, but ultimately, if you've got someone today who's spending 7 hours a day doing X, you put a bot in there, and they're now doing X, then that 7 hours is a benefit. And I guess it's how you track that and who tracks that for you. So that person may then move on to something else. But there must be a budget somewhere for that person to do that other work. Because if the bot wasn't there, that person wouldn't be able to do that other work.
Yeah, so that's what's hard to track, because if you move someone off a task and they stay under the same cost center but doing a different task, that's what's difficult to track. So do you track that by the time saving, or how would you track that?
Well, ultimately, when you start looking at a process to automate, before you automate, you start looking at the metrics anyway. So how many of these things are we doing, and how long are they taking to do? And therefore, you should be able to derive how many people you've got therefore attributed to that. Now, in an ideal world, that number there is somewhere on a budget line. So if you've got a team of 10, if you break down that budget, well, what is that 10 made up of? Well, we're doing 500 of these, 1,000 of these, so on and so forth. So it depends how detailed your budgets are. But when you go in to look at a process, you say, well, there's 500 of them. They take 7 hours a day. We're going to put a bot on there. Therefore, I've saved 7 hours. So that's 7 hours, and that's, over the week, you may end up saving one person. But then this is why I always work with a finance person, because somewhere in a budget, that one person is allocated to do that task. And then if they're going to do something else, well, who's doing that other thing now? Well, nobody's doing it. Well, where's it come from? What is it they're going to be doing? Because it may well be that there's a budget somewhere else for that person. I get when it's, when it's in a team and they just move on to something else. Who's doing that work now? So if they're concentrated 7 hours doing A, you to automate that, they're going to then move on to B. Well, who's doing B now? Because it's not them, it must be somebody else. And when you've got to try and find where that other person is, or where that other resource is. But, one of the keyest pieces of automation is when you're doing your assessment of processes to automate. Because you get the metrics. There's no point automating something, in my opinion, that isn't going to bring any value. Now, depending what that value is, whether it's financial value or it's quality or whatever that may be, you've got to do that right at the initial assessment. Every single process that I've automated so far, I've seen the return on that investment, and that is done by finding out the numbers at the beginning and tracking that budget immediately and getting the buy-in. So I don't know if I mentioned it when I first was talking, but what we did is, in other organizations, we set up a steering group, and that had, director level in there, didn't have exactly, had director level and heads of in there. And before we automated any process, we took process to that steering group. And the first question they asked is, well, what value is this going to bring to my business? What are we going to save? And nothing got through that steering group without a benefit on the back of it. So you had to work the operational team, the finance team, whoever it may be, to derive what the value was before you went into that steering group, because they were just going to turn around and say, well, why are we paying for X person to develop this process when it's not going to have a value on it? And the other thing that we do is the processes belong to the business. If you've got a COE if you automate a process, that process isn't owned by the COE. You're just giving resources to a team to do the process. So the ownership and the benefits and the benefit realization should really sit with that process owner. All you're doing is giving them a means and a way to automate it. But they should be the one that has the benefit challenge, and they should be the one that's championing the benefits realization. Because ultimately, as I say, you're just giving them the mechanics to be able to automate it. In terms of the resources and budgets, they've got their own budget. They need to walk into that steering group, if you have one, alongside of you, saying the same thing, that, right, okay, we've found this process. There's 5 people doing it today. We're going to put bots on it. I only need 1 person at the end of it. So therefore, we're going to save 4. Now, these 4 people are going to move off this process, and they're going to do X, Y, or Z. And it may be a process that's not been done for many times. It may be something that you only do once a week, or we're going to do it twice a week. Well, what's the value of doing it twice a week? So you really need to try and build that, that communication, that relationship with the people that you're going to automate the processes for, to be able to drive the benefit. Because as I say, in my opinion, they own that benefits realization. You're just a mechanism to be able to automate it.
I'd agree with that, Andrew. I think, listening to the points that you've raised here, and I think I've gone through a lot of the things that you said on the journey when I inherited RPA in its proof of concept, and I've gone through some of the challenges that you've talked about here. You've quite rightly drawn the line between what is classed as an original return on investment as part of a business case, but once, I work in IT and doing the IT delivery, but once IT have done that, the realisation of the benefits of that very truly sit within the business. And it's outside of my sphere of influence at that particular point. And this is a discussion I had with somebody in finance. So we've done a lot of work for our finance area. And they've agreed this through business cases that were produced originally. One of the heads of finance has agreed that we are delivering return on investment for them. Our own finance partner to IT said that they're not seeing the benefits from RPA, at which point I demonstrated that actually we have delivered benefits. It's just that you choose not to actually do anything with them. You've put that staff onto other things. You've not released that staff. So you've got to recognise what is in your own sphere of influence around this. And that's why I started to change the way in which I tackled this. Because I went with the angle of, right, I can demonstrate that I'm actually creating a team here that's almost now self-sufficient. The savings that we are generating, and you've agreed that we have generated, is almost covering off the full FTE of this RPA team that I'm running in IT. And shortly that will be fully realised. How the remainder of the university chooses to realise that benefit is not my problem. You need to go away and have those conversations with them, because I'm not going to fight that battle.
Sometimes in the past, sorry.
Go on. I was just going to say, it sounds quite common. Everyone seems to share some of these issues with the wider business. What were you going to say, Christian?
Well, I was going to say that sometimes the reason that I've been asked to look into an automation solution is because the number of staff working on a particular role has been gradually increasing over time. So whereas they were quite happy to have 2 people doing a manual task, once that becomes 10 people and 20 people, then that's when they start looking at things like automation and RPA as a way to bring that down. And if the actual volume of work is still increasing as we're developing these kind of solutions, then you can get to a point where you're looking back post-implementation and you're seeing that the FTE working on this particular piece has still increased despite all the work you've done. But of course, that's lower than what it would hypothetically have been had you not done it in the first place. So, I mean, that's why I think it's crucial to always define what it is you're going to be achieving in your benefit management strategy, so that you have then got something you can quantify at the end, even if someone does look back and say, well, I haven't seen my workforce go down, or I've seen it go up. And there's a number of reasons for that. It could be because the underlying work has gone up. It could be that they've been moved on to other things. But, I think that just having a way of defining those benefits and having the approach to calculating the benefits at the beginning is particularly important.
Joanne, you got off earlier. Did you want to go again?
I think I covered it. It's just really interesting, basically, like I said, so obviously we had that instance where sort of there was just one person obviously doing the job role, and it was quite a single point of failure, but it's just been really interesting listening to everyone else's as well. Another one that we found is sort of risk avoidance. So what was touched on earlier was processes that we necessarily weren't doing previously. So one that we had was, it was just basically making sure that all the company vehicles are taxed and MOT'd, something where it was just maybe someone had to remember to put a meeting request in to check them. So some of the things that we've got, so even though it was only a really small automation, some of it's just looking at a lot of the risk avoidance in the company that we could do as well that potentially wasn't there previously. That's what I wanted to add on before I got cut off, unfortunately.
Oh, so Chris was speaking then. Yeah, so do you guys have any kind of preference? I know, Chris, you go with the ROV, but...
Yeah, well, I'd just say that we don't not do ROI. We do put an ROI figure in, but we concentrate on the ROV because we see that that's a better example in most cases. Especially if you take Joanne's examples into consideration, it just provides a better picture of what it's going to look like at the end. Does a finance person want to see an ROI figure? Of course they do, because they want to know how much we're going to spend on the project, but and how much they're going to save over 3 years. But we really struggle generally to demonstrate that, so we'll usually concentrate on an ROV. And part of that is going back to what Andrew said, is we don't really know where the next thing is going. And we have people who'll go into one team, and they'll go to another team the next day, and then I'll be in another team the day after, and then be another team, and then they'll come back and do one process here and one process there, and they're all over the place. So it's very difficult to gauge what they actually do. So if you put in a value on that one person and saying, right, I'm going to get rid of that person because they do X, Y, Z, all the other teams go, oh, well, I need them for this, but we don't need them full time, we only need them for time. They'll all kick off. So if we concentrate on ROV, what we found is there's none of that panic of, oh, I've got to get rid of loads of people, or I've got to move somebody over here, or I've got to put somebody over here. We know what the value is on that team. We're putting that project in. There's going to be value on that team. The FTEs and the number of people they need and all the rest of it is a separate discussion that we have. It's more of an overall discussion based around growth. And we take into account, obviously, the projects that we've got and the time savings that we think we're going to have on processes and stuff like that, and push them up. So it's like almost like looking at the people, the customer, and the technology as like a separate thing to ROI.
And Rachel, how are you doing it? Are you having to build a business case for your next processes now you've delivered your first one, or have you kind of packaged it all up as a whole program?
Well, because we're working in different business areas, so we're working in AP at the moment, so we've got a business case for those. We've got about 9 processes there. I can't remember whether it's 9 or 11. We've got a group of processes there that we're looking to automate next. We've got the pipeline all set up, so we've done an overall business case for those to show what the costs are going to be to develop and run each process, and then it's kind of looking at how that's going to save, because there is a possibility here that there could be we could show an FTE saving because the teams have moved, so there's been a relocation in the team. They've moved from one of the locations to another one, and so there could be that we'll employ less staff to do the job in the new location. So there's a possibility there, but that's not your normal kind of scenario that you're in. But I think I'm more about the ROV as well.
And have you got buy-in for that? Do you need to go off and get funding, or is that in
No,
place?
we've got it all. We've got it all ready for that one. So the manager of that area is really keen on the whole thing, and he's signed off all the costs and everything already. So we've made quite good progress in that area while we've been working on the POV that we've been doing. So yeah, we've got good buy-in and everything's good in that area, but it's kind of doing that in every other area, making sure we'll get the same level of interest and from the area manager.
And how did you get on with promoting it out to the business? I know you spoke with Jonathan, he couldn't make it today, but what did you do to get buy-in?
So for the POV, the one that we've just put live, the process we've just put live, I did some slides, and we've kind of, at the moment we've just gone out to the local area, so it's within process and services. So before the process went live, I had a call with that team and went through everything that was going on there, explained how the process worked. I had some screenshots, I had a little demo of how it worked so they could see it in action and all that kind of thing. So that was to give them the kind of heads up. I'm going to leave it until it's embedded in a little bit, and I can shout about how well it's doing before kind of going back to the whole IT area and saying this is what's come of what we've been doing over the last few months.
Have you got a champion in that area?
In the process and services area we have, and what's really good about the AP area that we're taking over, that we're looking at now, is that the manager's the champion in that area. He kind of gets it, he sees how good it is. So I think we've got some good stuff coming in that area. But it's keeping that going and getting into all the different areas, and always having that pipeline ready. So we've got it for AP, we're starting on NAR now, we've got some processes to look at there, but it's kind of, we've got to try and keep that going and keep going into different areas and making sure that there's work there.
Yeah, and you'll get people coming to you from the business with new suggestions, won't you, as well, for what you could automate next?
Yeah, so it's a bit different in Amy, because we've got it's split into different business areas, and the different business areas work as they're siloed, so they don't kind of interact with each other. So it's a case of trying to get into those different areas, and we're having one of them. Someone's come to us and said they're putting in a bid for some work, and they need to save operational costs to be able to put a better bid in. So they've looked at us to do that, which is absolutely amazing that they've come to us, and it's a big thing that they're going to do. So that's a really good something to, you know, if we get into them, we can manage to do some stuff there. That's something to really shout about, and that's something we can then hopefully go. But none of the other business areas would see what we've done there. So it's kind of having to go into them all individually.
Yeah, it's good if you've got suggestions coming in. From my understanding, that's where some of the best automations come from, is from the end users themselves. So you're obviously doing some promotion. We're coming up to 11 o'clock. Has anyone got anything else to add before we wrap up?
I'd just like to share a couple of curious examples, if I may, of surprising areas to find benefit and surprising areas to not. And it relates a bit to what Andrew was saying earlier about how sometimes when you do an automation project, it's the first time that you've really had an analyst come and look at your business process and actually define the logic, and sort of do a review of what's done normally. And one case I worked on was one where, when we were reviewing the logic with a view to automating the work that was previously done manually, we found a sort of a great flaw in the business logic that was used. Whereas people had normally been using their judgment, when we actually had to codify the rules for how these decisions are made, we found that some of it was unreasonable. And it actually meant that we got quite a negative return on investment, because it transpired that some additional work should have always been done. But it was the right thing to do, and it was ultimately beneficial to the business that was resolved then, rather than found 2 years down the line. And then another case where we actually managed to gain quite a business improvement, quite a return on investment, despite the automation project not actually going ahead, was one where we did the business process review. And this was for a business process that had about 250 pages of flowchart maps. And when we were reviewing these to identify things that we could automate, we worked out that actually if we sort of rejigged the order of how all this work was done and skipped out some parts which really didn't need doing anyway, then we actually managed to reduce the process, make it considerably more efficient for the business to be done manually, So the automation didn't go ahead, but we still managed to get about a 15-20% efficiency improvement just from reviewing the maps. And I think that sometimes it's a missed opportunity that this logic isn't looked at, the business processes aren't looked at until automation comes in as an impetus for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got similar examples. As soon as you lift the cab bonnet up, you see all sorts of things that you didn't know was happening because they haven't invested the time to have a look at them because everyone's busy. So it is amazing what you'll find out about your business when you start looking at automation. It can be quite scary, some of the things you find, but usually you find some good nuggets in there to be able to change or adapt.
Thank you. I think that's about all we've got time for. I'll arrange another one of these in a couple of weeks' time. I'll try and catch you all on the phone between now and then. I know everyone's quite busy. And yeah, thanks for coming.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Really, everyone. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.